Indigenous people across the globe have used sacred plants and animal medicines for millennia to heal, illuminate, and connect them to the web of life. Traditionally, each culture had a healer that works on behalf of their patients, what we call the shaman. And now we find ourselves in a global village. Is it any wonder that we need our own healers that understand the deep power and sacredness these ancient earth medicines can reveal? My name's Rak Razam, and I'm an author, filmmaker, and shamanic facilitator. Join me as I interview and sit in ceremony, experiencing healing medicines with Western shamans across the globe. Watch firsthand as I document a modern shamanic resurgence being passed on from indigenous tribes to a new wave of medicine people working in the 21st century.
They had a completely different worldview, I guess, than we do nowadays after a few generations of Richard Nixon's instigated war on drugs.
Okay, guys, welcome back to the Grimerica show. We are going to be chatting with Niles and Rak a little bit later about psychedelics and festivals and shamanism and all sorts of fun stuff. Niles' audio does get a little sketchy from time to time. And a long time coming, we got RPJ is going to join us for the intro here and say hello again. But of course, as always, the one and only ground beefcake Dunlop. How's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. You get so excited.
Let's come to that.
I throw him the beefcake whenever I want to cheer him up.
Okay.
Oh, good to hear your voice again, Red.
Yeah, nice to be back. It was a long time ago since we last convened for a Grimerica recording, and I really miss talking to you guys.
Yeah, we met. It's funny. I've been thinking lots about you, and then Darren says, "Oh yeah, I talked to you the other night." So I'm glad. And it's funny, this episode is actually quite appropriate because these guys were on talking about their documentary. That's Niles Heckman and Rak Razam about Shamans of the Global Village. And the first episode was about, Darren, wasn't it about the toad
Licking the toad.
In Mexico, right? The secretion from it.
Are you sure it's from Mexico? Is it
No.
not from Brazil?
No, it's not from that far.
He's not sure.
Now I feel like I'm fucking losing it. It's been a couple of weeks since we chatted with him.
It's in the Sonoran Desert.
Yeah.
Where's the Sonoran Desert?
Okay, yeah.
That's in Mexico, right?
Sure.
You know, my
Next to the
5-year-old
US
daughter
border,
could tell me where the Sonoran Desert is for sure.
Sure. Where all the rapists and all the Muslim terrorists are crossing.
And drug
to
dealers.
The US.
Don't forget drug dealers.
So they're now using the toads, obviously the psychedelic toads, as weapons of mass destruction.
You better watch out.
Makes total sense.
You better watch out. You don't want them to start calling those toads WMDs or they'll be coming.
That's pretty funny.
That was a nice little rant.
They do have to be careful when they're the part where they get the secretion from the toads is sort of controlled by the drug lords. So it is a tricky scenario.
Because you have to sneak into cartel land? Is that cartel land, Red?
Sonora Desert? Oh, yeah. Well, it's so big, I guess it's no man's land.
It's probably where a lot of bodies are buried, I bet.
There's some pretty good healing going on.
You can OD on toad, I think. So you got to watch.
Obviously,
that.
Sonora is where the legendary Mexican shaman Don Juan Matus used to live. He was supposed to be a Yaqui Indian, and that's where Carlos Castañeda used to drive from Los Angeles to meet with him. But I don't know. It's the first time that I heard of the use of toads there in order to elicit entheogenic trips.
Yeah, it's going to be quite. I think it's going to be quite important coming up in the.
It's an interesting synchronicity because I've been listening to all the episodes of Mysterious Universe, and the one that I was listening to just today in the afternoon was when they were talking about sapo, this psychedelic substance that they extract from an Amazonian toad, and a tribe uses it in order to, have trips, in order to also to give them like more acute senses and also even precognition. They know where to find game in the jungle, So instead of looking around, all day for the animals and tracking them as for the scat or their tracks in the ground or whatnot, these substances like open their perceptions, and they know where to find them, allegedly.
Wow. Yeah, this is the Sonoran desert toad, I guess, which is also called the bufo.
Yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah.
Just lick his back. You should head down there, Red. Give it a lick and record yourself.
Oh man, I don't think I will be strong
just
enough.
Just fucking dump right into the deep end of the pool.
Oh no, you really need to be in some kind of really, I don't know.
I could just picture you like coming to the jungle with like long hair and an acoustic guitar.
Yeah, we can't stop here. This is Toad Country.
Your fear of all your jobs going back to the States will disappear.
Toad harvesting.
Wasn't it the other way around?
Yeah. Well, I guess it works both ways.
Yeah, but it works both ways, and we're definitely going to live into very interesting times in the years to come. That's for sure.
Is there a different way that the Mexicans legalize their drugs down there? Like, because it's still really strict against some drugs, right? But I thought I've heard of other stuff like ibogaine and other things down there being used in treatment programs. So I wonder if like the categorization is different from Canada and the States.
I don't know. Let me check. Ibogaine legal in Mexico. I'm not sure.
But yeah, I feel like they're less strict on like proper psychedelics as opposed to just lumping anything that's not fucking sold through a pharmacy as illegal.
Well, there's a lot of herbal, folk remedies that are being sold. In markets. Yeah, I mean, things, old wives' remedies, the herbal-based stuff.
Like the Eye of Newt?
I guess. I don't know what that is.
I'm just kidding.
And I know there's a lot of ibogaine centers.
What's that Mexico. Shit for again?
It's also for addiction, or that's what I think that's what it's being used for. And
although to be honest, I think this is more for American tourists than for Mexican regulars. The fact that I'm reading this and it's the page is in English instead of having the chance to read it in English and in Spanish makes me think that the market is more like based or more focused on American tourists who travel to Mexico in order to get the treatment that's probably being restricted in the United States. I don't know. I mean, I've never heard of any kind of like, what's the Mexican government's posture regarding ibogaine. I don't think they pretty much care.
Yeah,
I know that they're probably more centered in trying to ban things like cannabis and LSD and the usual stuff, right? They probably, if you go to the guy in front that is like in charge of the drug war in Mexico, you mention ibogaine and he probably is going to go, what?
Yeah.
Ibo what?
Yeah.
Ibo what?
So you're catching up on old MU episodes?
I'm trying to.
Anything you're interested in lately? Like anything else?
Podcast wise,
or just topic wise?
Is Aaron still on MU?
What?
Is Aaron still on MU?
What, the old episodes?
The new ones.
Oh yeah, no, he's talking about the old ones.
I'm talking about the new
ones.
I'm
still in the ones that from September, man.
September.
It's going to take me a while to catch up, because there was a time back in the day when I used to listen to at least 3 or 4 podcasts a day. And in my old job, it was no longer the case. I could only listen to podcasts during my commutes. I couldn't listen to them while I was at the office, because, there was always this like nagging anxiety that if you put on your headphones, someone is going to call you or ask you a question, and you're not, like you turn around and you see that your boss is like has been standing right in front of you, like for the last 5 minutes, just like watching you jiggle or giggle or for something that you were listening in the podcast.
Nice.
So that's why I cut back on my podcast listening, and I'm trying to catch up.
It's too much, eh?
Yeah. There comes a time when you say, well, I'll have to be more selective, even if I don't want to.
Yeah, that becomes a problem. Like, I can only listen to so much, I mean, I'm lucky. I can get I can do in a good week, I can do 12 or, 15 hours of audio.
Okay, here's $1 million idea. As there's the Reader's Digest, right? This pocket-size magazine that is supposed to be a digest of many publications. There should be the podcast digest. Like someone listen to all this stuff and giving you like snippets. The best thing that's out of those podcasts, like in 15 minutes instead of 2 hours.
Oh, like
well, I think I've seen.
You mean like an audio one, though? Like an audio one?
I've seen someone do best ofs where they take clips.
That's a good idea.
But I mean, what an undertaking!
Sure.
I mean, if you're listening to them all anyway, holy
you can't.
You need a team of tons of people. It'd have to be some sort of like, user-based interface.
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe someone.
Who knows what you'll end up with?
It's a good idea.
Sure.
It is a good idea.
There are tasks and there are jobs in which, unfortunately, you are not able to like kick back and put on your headphones and listen to a good podcast. You just can't, because probably, if you are into customer service, you definitely shouldn't put on your headphones, because you're not going to perform your job well. It's only when you're not going to be disturbed, the task at hand is not so demanding that you really have to concentrate 100% what you're doing. I mean, something like writing an article or a blog I can't even concentrate if I'm listening to a song. It has to be music without any voices.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, it's good for like I listen when sometimes I'm doing the dishes, or if I'm cooking when I'm around the house, or if I'm doing work.
Exactly. You go for a walk, you're mowing the lawn, you're walking the dog. Things like that is when it's great to have the podcast experience.
Podcasts are the shit. We rely on podcasts for this podcast.
So any topics
I
interesting
haven't
you
listened to
lately?
fucking MU in so long. I should go back.
At least, I don't know if you guys catch that New York Times article from November the 3rd about how the promise of genetically modified crops, has been kind of like finally come to an end. They for the longest time the struggle or the focus of the GM crops debate was whether they could be harmful for humans, and that's why the people were so obsessed with the proper labeling of foodstuffs that were made or based by GM crops. But there was this article from the New York Times written by Danny Hakim who says that, whereas in Europe, GM crops were not like fully embraced as much as in Canada and the United States, after 20 years of so, once you crunch the numbers or make comparisons, the yields in crops from the United States and Canada they're pretty much the same as the ones they have in Europe. And the thing is that in Europe they don't use as much herbicides on the crops as they do in the United States. So in the end, the only thing they were good of for the GM crops was they could withstand the use of more herbicides, but they didn't yield more larger crops. So in the end, so what's the deal? I mean, weren't these supposed to be the wonder foods that would feed a growing population in the 21st century? That was the promise. I mean, the idea that with GM crops, you will be able to have double or triple the amount of crops, which was supposed to be
so you can offset the
necessary.
Cost of the seeds that you have to rebuy every year.
Sure. So in the end, I mean, it
turned out to be a giant scam.
Well, yeah, it's only Monsanto, and Bayer and all these giant companies get benefit from it. And we've discussed this, on other occasions. I think that I have stated my opinion that, GM crops, I wasn't that against them, because of the fear that they could proven to be, harmful for human consumption. But in the end, if they are no better than regular crops, in order to increase the yield, of agricultural production, then okay, and also like you said, you have to take into account that the seeds, the farmers cannot reuse them for the next season and all of that. And they also have to use the herbicides that are being, that these seeds have been modified against. Of course, those herbicides are also provided by the same companies. So, wow, I mean, it really means that we should rethink about this whole thing, and say, it's a good thing that there's been this general outcry against companies like Monsanto, especially in Europe. And I wish that something like that keeps going on, and more so in the American continent.
Yeah, I agree 100%. They seem to be controlling so much, these big companies. I mean, there was a media blitz on an article. Do you remember this one, Darren? A few months ago, it was in Canada, I believe. Some scientific report coming out that GMOs are not as dangerous as everybody thinks, and it was like when you dug into the actual structure of it and the content of the study, it was pretty much bullshit. But they just started, the headlines were just, everybody had to cover it for a few days, and that's all it takes to all of a sudden just say, oh, well, this article came out and it says it's okay, but really when you dig into the details of it, it was bullshit.
Sure, and the article didn't mention what I think is the worst thing that has come out of Monsanto's monopoly, which is obviously the increasingly worrying decline of bee population, globally. Which I think it's fair to say, I mean, I don't think it's far-fetched to claim that it has been proven that there's a direct link between the use of these herbicides and pesticides and the declines of bee colonies, which are necessary also for the pollination or of other crucial crops throughout, the industrialized world.
Well, I think there's only really the big four in Canada, right? Corn, canola, soy, and sugar beets. And other
Really?
stuff that's import.
What about all the stuff
really
that
the only
we
four
have
that we
in
grow.
our yeah? I mean, there's so much stuff in our stores that it's hard to know whether it's GMO or not. I mean, I don't even know.
I'm pretty good. I mean, the thing is, even if they won't legislate them to label GMO, half the grocery store now has a certified non-GMO label.
Sure, I mean, yeah.
So they're just doing it the opposite way. They'll tell you that they're not GMO, which is an easier process to get than organic, and boom, 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 boom. And then when we go through the grocery store, if there's one there that has a non-GMO on it, I'm grabbing it.
Yeah.
Sure.
And there is a big movement back to cooking your own. I mean, growing your own food, and it does. I hope that continues. Buying more locally and organically, and cooking your own food.
I cook my own food all the time.
Obviously, in big cities like Mexico, that's a difficult proposition. Even though I've noticed how the local authorities are trying to promote, how consumers get to consume from local crops, things that are actually grown, if not in Mexico City, at least, in the periphery of Mexico City, some local crops that, seasonal things, and for locally, you could see more of that, developing as, it just makes sense. I think that even from the point of view of
logistics.
Sure, and also I guess the experience. I guess I've always wondered. I've always wanted the experience of growing my own food, of growing something that I can then taste or enjoy, in a particular meal, and say to people, hey, this thing that you're tasting, I actually grew it. I actually took care of it, from beginning to end.
So do you guys have GMO? No.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting story. There's been a lot of pushback. The government has always tried to give license to Monsanto to
because Monsanto's just greasing them all.
The GM crops, but there's been a lot of pushback from local farmers, to try to reject that. And apparently, let me see if I can find this story. There was a story of of farmers, bee growers in Yucatan who managed to make Monsanto lose a case court. Yeah, this is a story that was published in The Guardian in August 8th of 2014. Yeah. So beekeepers in Mexico managed to make Monsanto lose their permit to grow GM soybeans. So yeah, that's one example, and there's also a lot of people who push against the introduction of GM, crops, especially corn. I mean, think about it. I mean, corn is, well, not pun intended, but it's the cornerstone of Mexican diet. I mean, corn came from Mexico. So maize came from Mexico. That's how important it is. I mean, even you go back to the mythologies of the original inhabitants of this land. I mean, the Mayas believed that the gods have made human beings out of corn dough. No, so there's that. The people who are trying to maintain very exclusive and very local strands of corn, to preserve them and protect them, and the only way to do that is if you ban the introduction of GM strands.
That's crazy. And, so you guys in Mexico have done a way better job at blocking all this than the States and Canada. Like, we're just...
Well, it's probably a losing battle, because... Well, maybe it was a losing battle up until now, because now people who reject Monsanto can go and use articles such as the one that I just read and said, but look, in the end, it's not worth it. It's not worth give these guys, carte blanche and introduce these GM strands that in the end, they're not really making the job. I think there are better ways to secure and sustain a growing population. There's, for example, this scientist, I'm going to look, Green Revolution. There was a foreign scientist who came to Mexico in the 1930s and 60s. Let me see. I'm reading the Wikipedia page. Okay, Norman Borlaug, the father of the Green Revolution, received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1970. Did a lot of work here in Mexico, trying to install, farming procedures, that were very, very revolutionary, I guess hence the name, and which helped, feed the world on a time when many people thought that overpopulation was going to bring about quite Malthusian, future, very apocalyptic. I mean, remember, this is the time of the movie Soylent Green, when people thought, okay, so
Green is people.
The Soylent Green is people. That movie is from the 1970s. Kind of feels very prescient nowadays, but there was this fear, the world keeps getting, bigger and bigger, where sooner or later we're not going to have enough food to feed the population. So maybe people will start going to start eating each other. But thanks to the efforts of people like Norman Borlaug, that didn't happen, because he went to Mexico. He came to Mexico, then he went to India, and he, freely gave advice to all these farmers on how to increase the yields of the crops. No Monsanto or no GM technology involved. I guess it was just, ingenuity. And in my humble opinion, what was key was that he was freely sharing this technology with the farmers. He wasn't charging anything, he was giving them, free advice, obviously at the behest of the government who had invited him. But, I mean, if you think about it, I think I've made this comparison before, but Norman Borlaug was for the agriculture business, like Linus Torvald, with Linux. And Monsanto is Microsoft. Monsanto is the old way of doing things, of thinking that you need to monopolize the market, you need to put, a copyright on everything you do, because that's the only way you can make a profit. And I think that this needs to change, especially when, the livelihood and the survival of people in developing countries is involved.
Especially when they get caught for doing these things and this, and they just get fined, right? Nobody goes to jail. There's nobody really getting in trouble. They just get a slap on the wrist and
chop off his head.
I heard about some, I don't know if it was a bank or a big company like Monsanto, where they got a 2% of the profit they made on this crime. That was their fine.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's less than the tax.
Yeah.
Oh, the tax is probably
I
zero.
think that it's going to change. And what you need to do is to try to, I guess, this is probably my naive, idealistic thinking. But if you inform the public and you say, well, this, Dorito that you want to eat actually came from a crop that was raised from a Monsanto seed. And look at what has happened with local farmers thanks to this. Now, are you sure you want to buy this bag of Doritos instead of maybe buying another bag that may be, 50 cents more expensive, but that actually, promotes the work of local farmers who are using, better farming techniques that are, gentler to the land, that, produces less pollution, whatnot, yada, yada, yada. We have the technology to empower consumers in that way. It's just a matter of consumers to start giving a damn about it.
Yeah, it's happening. I think it's happening. Mm-hmm. Do we got some time for a couple listener emails?
Sure.
So I got one that's kind of appropriate for this episode.
Is it jingly?
Well, it's kind of jingly. I mean, it's kind of a trip report. Maybe that Terrence McKenna one would be good.
Psychedelics are catalysts of consciousness.
That's a great jingle. Hey?
Speaking of which, before you read the comment, have you guys watched Doctor Strange?
No, not yet.
Dude, go see it. If you're into Terrence McKenna stuff, you're into all those
really? Yeah.
Stuff,
oh, yeah. No, I will for sure.
You have to go see it.
Doctor Strange.
You have to go. There are some scenes in that movie that, if you have never tried psychedelics, you say, okay, so that's how the machine elves look like. And you probably, if you have taken psychedelics, you probably say, yeah, these guys got it right.
Wow. Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it.
What is it, a movie? What's it called?
It's like a Marvel movie, isn't it? Like a sort of a superhero one, Doctor Strange. So it's not Strange Love or whatever. It's Strange.
Yeah, Doctor Strange is a superhero, but it's like more of a
Buddhist kind of Buddhist,
mystical.
Mystic.
Yeah, it's like the mystical side of Marvel.
Yeah.
If you guys, have never read the book Mutants and Mystics by Dr. Jeffrey Kripal, I cannot recommend that book highly enough. Please, go to Amazon right now. Take advantage of the Black Friday deals. Get that book, and also get Authors of the Impossible by him. You won't regret it.
I'll put a link in the show notes to it for people.
Right.
Yes, you will. What's the email say?
So this is from Reed. It's a spamgram email. Reed from Nebraska. We love to hear from our listeners, stories and encounters of the strange, lucid dreams, trip reports, all that stuff. Email Graham at Grimerica.com. Grimerica. Slip of the tongue.
That might be Freudian slip. I wonder if Grimerica is available. Maybe we could register it for when I kick you off the island.
So he says, Dear Graham, this past summer I stumbled upon the Grimerica show during the beginning of my awakening. This awakening started while microdosing magic mushrooms for about 2 weeks straight. The doors of perception seemed to come swinging open and I started to question everything. I'm a 22-year-old college student, so this was something quite profound to be asking all these big questions at such a young age already. Luckily, I've had the time lately to devote to delving fully into my newfound passions and interests. I've been able to start on a new path of self-development, integrating these revelations, and I think that mushrooms have helped me get rid of a long-lasting depression. Since then, I've gone down the rabbit hole on many topics, including ancient civilizations, conspiracies, psychedelics, consciousness, resonance and vibrations, etc. Along the way, the Grimerica show has been one of my main tools for awakening, and I feel deeply grateful for all that you guys have done. I'm still working my way back through the back catalog, and I can't wait to get my mind blown with every episode I listen to. I hope I make it up your way one day so I can meet you guys. I'd love to sit in the igloo and medicate with Darren while playing the Chemtrails jingle on repeat, much to Graham's disapproval. This is this is a bucket list type material that only fellow Grimerica listeners can appreciate. Anyways, don't change a thing, you guys, and a donation is heading your way soon. That's Reed from Nebraska. He says, P.S. Interested if you guys have done much looking into bioacoustics research. Shari Edwards of Sound Health Options has done a lot of great work using her talents in developing software to break down the specific frequencies of the human voice. Using this information, she can tell a lot about personality and if people are telling the truth. Also, the cause of chronic conditions and illnesses can be pinpointed using the vocal profile and can be used as a tool in sound healing.
Huh. Hey, thanks, Reed.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm going to look into that.
Absolutely. And yeah, come on by the igloo if you're ever in town. And yeah, if you haven't checked out the back catalog, you should, because there's about 190 some odd episodes. I think this episode's actually number 199. So
yeah,
next week's 200. Wow. We've planned nothing as usual. But
when I first read this, I thought it said meditate with Darren, but it says medicate the second time around.
We might be able to slap.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
But anyway, speaking of the back catalog, those episodes are all free, and we have taken the vow of no paywalls and everything else. So if you do find some value in the content that we've listened to, then you should. If you can do so like Reed, find it in your heart to help us out monetarily. You can go to grimerica.ca/support. There's going to be a bunch of different options there for a monthly subscription, anything from $1 a month to $30 a month, which are all, I might add, less than the price of a cup of coffee a day. And if not, you can review the show. That helps. You can spam Graham, helps. You can sign up for the newsletter. All that stuff is in the show notes, of course, and that's just how you can help us keep this truck rolling along.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it starts to bind up without greasing the wheels,
yeah,
you know?
That's true.
And, of course, the best way of all to help out the show is to tell people about the show.
Yeah.
Tell your friends about the show. Otherwise, we'll get canceled like Arrested Development. We'd never get canceled.
No.
Well, no, Arrested Development. Don't you remember, like, the last season of Arrested Development? They were, like, begging people to tell people about the show.
Well,
it would,
really?
like, come up in the script and be like, tell your friends about this show.
Really? We'll only get canceled once they come out with a podcast license and they realize that we're offending some
Curry owes us a
special interest group
podcast
or
license,
something.
so we should be good. But, yeah, we will get pushed off the internet eventually. Unless we take over this motherfucker.
That's right. Be part of the change. Excuse me. All right. What do you want now, Darren? UFO quote or what's...
Oh, yeah, let's do...
Darren and Graham are going deep. It's a profound UFO quote of the week.
All right.
How many of these you already have?
About 199.
No, I'm talking about jingles.
like 30.
A few. 20.
Actually,
Actually, that's another way you can send some jingles in. So
there's definitely more than 20 because we're on to the second page.
Yeah. We could use another like spamgram jingle or awakening jingle or even another trip report, a lucid dreams. What else? There was another one that we wanted to do. Anyways.
There's tons. A support jingle.
Yeah. So I got two short UFO quotes of the week here. It's a double. If that's okay with you, Darren.
Yeah, I suppose.
It was especially because Red Pill Junkie's here and it's been a while since we've talked about this. It was approximately 50 feet in length. There were portholes on the side, but there were no visible signs of propulsion. The ship appeared to be metallic and gave off a bright glow. There was a low whirring sound coming from it. That was Police Constable Brian Earnshaw, backup Lancashire, October 1969. Two other uniformed officers, PC Colin Donahue and Malcolm Reeder, also witnessed the object from a different location. Ooh. And then the next one is, there was an eerie, greenish-gray glow in the sky. Then I picked out an object about 30 feet long and built up in 3 sections with a top looking like a dustbin lid. It gave off a high-pitched whine. I was paralyzed. I just couldn't believe it. That was Police Constable Colin Perks, Wimslow, Cheshire, March 1966.
Nice.
I like those ones where, it's corroborated by different policemen witnessing it from a different spot.
And paint a nice picture.
Definitely not an airplane.
Why not?
No.
Swamp gas? You just see people yelling at their stereo.
Did you see that?
Definitely a flock of geese.
Did you see that meme with all the different pictures of all these crazy looking craft, and then it had like the explanation of them, swamp gas, and then, like one of them was swamp gas, and the rest of them were like weather balloon, weather balloon, weather balloon, weather balloon.
Yeah.
No.
Weren't you looking for that particular poster when we were at the first Paradigm Symposium?
I was, yeah, but I was just looking for the one with all the different craft.
Yeah, I remember the look of the lady at the store when you explained to her you were purportedly there specifically in the lookout for a UFO poster, and I was like, yeah, I don't know him. I just met him today.
Oh, that's right. Yes, we're in the mall. We're in the mall probably.
Yeah, the Mall of America.
Oh, that's funny.
Huh. Nice. Probably got time for one more.
One more email?
Sure.
Okay, let's see here. Okay, this is just a little bit of a synchro kind of thing. I think it's a synchro. Or it could be a ripple stick. Actually, we need a ripple stick jingle. Like kind of a precog.
I'm a rambling grand with synchronicities all over the web. And Darren is skeptical about everyone and don't believe it yet.
This is from Dave. He says, "Hey Graham, just a quick one. I've just finished listening to the Cliff High show. Wow, fantastic.
Ooh, that was a fun one.
And of course, please don't change a thing. You put up a lot of here we go. You put up with a lot of shit from Darren, all in good fun, of course, but it makes for great listening. Not that hearing you cop shit is good. It's that you seem to have a Teflon skin and just let it roll off."
Yeah, that shit roll right off his skin and up his butt.
Anyway. Anyway, the synchro. So the local supermarket reduces the price of their bakery bread at the end of each day. If I happen to be there at night time, I'll get a few loaves and keep them in the freezer. A few days ago, we pulled out an olive sourdough loaf to cut up for lunch, and I've been thinking lately to try cut down on so many carbs like bread and pasta just to make myself feel better. I'd already had a few meals over the past few days while thinking about cutting down on carbs when, for whatever reason, I said, fuck it, I don't want bread with my sandwich. I'll just have spinach leaves in place of bread. My wife looked at me weird and made a breadless sandwich while baking a normal sandwich for her and our 2 young kids. So we sit down for lunch at the table. 3/4 of the way through her sandwich, my wife pulls out a piece of glass from the bread, which she had crunched on. Luckily, she didn't swallow any, we think. We are now in the process of following it up with the supermarket, which I've been assured they're taking it very seriously. He says bullshit.
Is he in the States?
Anyway, the piece of...
Sue the fuckers back to the Stone Age.
Come on. Anyways, the piece of bread she pulled it out of would probably have been my piece, as she always makes food for the kids, then me, then herself, just the way she is. Anyways, love the show. We'll send through some dollars when I've got a job. Till then, keep up the good work.
Buy your wife some flowers before you send money to the show.
Yeah.
I
you should have just grabbed the glass, bit on it, made your mouth bleed, and then went into the store, and then you could get a couple thousand for your. It's like a Bob and Doug McKenzie way.
We don't encourage fucking smoking pot on the show.
Put the mouse in the beer bottle so you get the free beer.
Well, you should at least get a year full of free bread from that supermarket.
I've been making a lot of my own bread lately.
How would glass get in there, though?
Yeah, it's really pretty easy.
How would glass get in there, though? You haven't been making your own bread.
Yeah.
No, you've tried it. What?
Yeah. It's really not that hard.
Ever since you found out that gluten is really not a problem if you make bread the
Ever
ancient
since
way?
I really started looking at the ingredients on the loaf of bread.
Yeah.
And it's just like as long
Sugar,
as my arm.
Yeah.
And then at home, you know what I make my bread with? I make my bread with yeast, warm water, flour, and a bit of honey.
Here's my prediction.
And a bit of honey?
And some salt.
All the people who were worried about gluten are going to be very, very, embarrassed about it. It's going to be one of those things like, oh, yeah, the gluten scare.
The big gluten scare, 2016.
No, I don't believe it. I think that's firmly implanted. I think that's firmly implanted as bad, and things will just go the non-gluten way.
Sure.
So I can make 4 loaves of bread if you do it first thing Sunday morning.
Lowering your salt and drinking like 8 glasses of water, and then turns out, no, you actually need salt in your system, and don't drink that much water because it's going to get rid of all the calcium in your bones. So, no, just get back to where you.
No,
doing before you read all those.
No, because there's some things like I think gluten, sugar, and what else was I thinking of? There's a few things that just I don't think they're ever going to come back to being healthy. One of my favorite
Woody Allen movies is The Dreamer. I think it's from 1973. It's as old as I am. And they make fun of all those New Age healthy diets from the 1960s. And when the guy is explaining to Woody Allen that he was asleep for 50 years, and it's like, Woody Allen is like, oh my God, I don't think I can take it yet. And the doctor is, here, take this. And it's a cigarette. And he said, no, I don't smoke. And the doctor says, it's tobacco. It's the healthiest thing in the world. I love that scene.
Nice. Well, I suppose we should wrap it up.
Should we?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, enjoy.
If you want my bread recipe, you can spam Graham, and I'll send it to you.
Does it taste good?
Yeah, it tastes delicious.
Does it go bad in a day? Does it go bad in a couple days?
I'm a really good cook. Yeah.
Well, I know you do some cooking, but I knew you talked about the bread thing, but I didn't think you were doing it every Sunday.
Which is all you need.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
How come you haven't brought me a piece of Darren's homemade toast or something like that?
Because I'm not your fucking servant. If you want me to cook for you, come for dinner.
All right.
I don't eat. That's like nighttime food for me.
Okay,
toast.
so Graham's
or
gonna
some
go
fresh bread, some cheese, and some
Darren's Thanksgiving dinner, and Darren's gonna serve his
over,
famous
motherfucker.
bread.
Thanksgiving was a month ago.
Oh,
a month and a half ago. The real Thanksgiving,
okay.
not the Black Friday Thanksgiving.
Well, you can do it all over again.
I'm down for that. I do love to overeat. I like Thanksgiving too because there's just so much everything. There's like so much of that food that really only comes out at Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
hammer down on it, like the candied yams and the
turkey.
No, turkey you can have a couple times a year, and chicken's not that far off.
Love turkey.
So cranberry things, or there's 6 different kinds of potatoes, turnips. Oof. Good stuff. And then you have leftovers for a couple days. And stuffing. I used to be a big stuffing cooker. I should do a stuffing for Christmas, maybe. When I was a kid, I had the book that was like 50 different stuffings, cookbook.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
None of them do you actually stuff into the bird.
Okay, you serve it.
We just cook it on the side. No reason. It's just, they're
funny.
They're just hoity-toity fancy stuffings. I guess you just have to, there's a lot of work to them.
I think the fancy stuffings are the ones that are in the bird.
You can't fit enough fucking stuffing in the bird for 10 people.
I think you can, no? Do people just do that as tradition?
That's a tradition.
Because we always have stuffing from the bird, and then there's
Sometimes
another pot that's made
Sometimes
as well.
There's both. Well, we'll have to listen to No Agenda this week, and Dvorak will tell you why the stuffing in the bird can kill you is bullshit.
Adam Loyal was telling me about, this idea of a pheasant inside of chicken.
Oh, a turducken.
Turkey.
A turducken.
Yeah, like a Russian doll of, of cooking.
No, it's a duck inside it's a chicken inside a duck inside a turkey.
And then that should be inside an ostrich, I think.
I think ostrich are endangered.
Need to push it.
I bet you they'd be kind of tough, ostrich. I don't know if I want to eat ostrich.
Oh, there's tasty food.
I think there's a beer can inside the chicken too, probably. They do them with beer cans.
Yeah, you can do a beer can chicken. That's for the barbecue. That's different.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. You don't deep fry the beer can.
What do you eat?
What?
What do you ever cook?
I cook fish. I cook fish and vegetables. I'm trying to eat more fish. DHA is apparently like the most important thing we need to put in our bodies now. Like, and I'm realizing this from some scientists that are pretty out there.
Yeah.
So
I like fish.
So and then I cook myself a steak sometimes and some vegetables. I try and eat just like, vegetables and fish and stuff. But I like pancakes and bacon too. But I use Bob's Red Mill 10-grain pancakes.
Bacon's good
it's
for you.
Like really good pancake
Why would
ingredients.
You just make your own pancakes?
Because this is better for you.
It takes like a minute and a half.
This is better.
Oh, it's never better for you.
Then using the white flour and all that. No, it's Bob's Red Mill. Like it's fucking natural, organic. 10 grain, like 10 grain. I mean, I can't make it any better than that.
Organic unbleached flour. Yeah, you can. You'd be surprised. You could have your organic free-run eggs. Got from the farm.
I know I get free
couple eggs, some milk, and your unbleached flour. Done.
Yeah, but
my 5-year-old,
flour.
My 5-year-old makes
I don't like the white flour. Is not good for you, isn't it?
I get unbleached flour.
Is that better?
I don't know. I don't care.
Yeah, well, you were an advocate of table salt over Himalayan sea salt not too long ago.
That goes back to fucking gluten, right?
Okay.
That's the main dilemma.
Just remember,
but you could offset the flour with whatever you want.
Right.
Just remember, if you want to make an apple pie from scratch...
I don't care how you spell it.
What was that, Red?
You want to make an apple pie from scratch, you have to make the entire universe,
Yeah.
That Carl Sagan quote.
Yeah.
You reminded me of it.
Well, I'm working off the backs of other people. But I can make an apple pie from scratch, too.
Have you ever heard that jingle?
Our universe.
No, we should make it a jingle.
No, there's a jingle out there.
I should take a cut from it, and we'll use that to make the cooking segment jingle for when I give my recipes.
There you go.
All right, well, we should about wrap it up. It's been great to have Red back.
Nice chatting with you, Red.
The audio
nice to be back.
Does get a little spotty, especially with Niles' end. There was a connection issue there, but you motherfuckers will just have to deal with it. For the most part, it's not too bad. It's listenable for sure. Enjoy the chat.
All right, tonight we've got one of our past guests, Niles Heckman, back with us in Grimerica, and he's brought along Rak Razam, and these guys are developing a great documentary series called Shamans of the Global Village. And they both have their own website and their own podcast, and they're both into sort of like the new awakening, psychedelics, and plant medicines and all that. So it's great to have you guys on. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, guys. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us, fellas. It's good to talk to you again, as always.
Hey, that's actually a good thing to get. Whenever we ask both you a question, we'll go in that order that we just did. So that we're not. See? Perfect.
Yeah.
I should also mention we have Michael here, a friend of the show, is going to jump in like a fly on the wall.
Hey, guys. Grimerica.
So, guys, I watched your first episode the other night, and it was fantastic. Absolutely loved it. You guys did just a great job.
Well, that was all Niles's amazing work there. I'll let him take the credit.
Do you want to? Can you get in?
Yeah. Well, thank you, man. So, go ahead.
Just describe that first episode. It was. It was just. I don't know. It was a good taste of what's to come, I guess.
Yeah. And, for something that was made kind of independently on a very shoestring budget, it's something that we're very proud of. Rak has a background as kind of an experiential journalist doing a lot within the entheogenic community. And I'll kind of let him introduce himself. And then I have a background working in Hollywood. So the show is kind of the culmination of our two kind of life's work thus far. And we're really proud of it. So thank you for saying so, man. That means a lot.
Yeah, it was good. So how many? Yeah. Go ahead, Rak.
I was going to say, it's a labor of love, and it's something that I've been involved in documenting and working as a journalist, commenting on alternative culture and the rise in shamanism and predominantly ayahuasca. About 10 years ago, I went down to the Amazon as a freelance writer and was writing about the rise in ayahuasca tourism and what the role of the shaman was in the 21st century and what the importance of that was. And I wrote a few books on that and did another documentary in ayahuasca. And it just kept evolving. And there's been such an interest and surge in global interest in both shamanism and plant-based medicines that it really seemed like it was time to document that in an ongoing online TV show.
Nice. That's great. We talk about this quite a bit on the show. Actually, it ends up coming up. We do a little segment even called Trip Reports from listeners who send us their stories about some sort of awakening, usually through psychedelics of one sort or another. And of course, we talk about the exodus to South America for ayahuasca and all that. So it's great to, it's great to be a part of this sort of, I can't kind of think of it as an awakening too. And some of the things that I didn't realize were happening in the first episode when you guys were talking about the main topic was the toad secretion. I can't remember what it's called, but that it was actually, some of these things were global way before we thought they were.
Yeah, I mean, there's been many civilizations across the world that have used plant or animal psychoactive medicines to alter their consciousness, but it's not something like they had a completely different worldview, I guess, than we do nowadays after a few generations of Richard Nixon's instigated war on drugs. It's you look at the cultures like the Maya or the Olmecs or the Aztecs, or even throughout Europe you had the Eleusinian mysteries, which the Greeks had a psychoactive substance they used in an initiation rite, which their ceremonies and their rituals lasted for over 2,000 years. And the Greeks are sort of the bastion of not just democracy, but a lot of mathematics and philosophy and the sort of underpinnings of what became Western civilization. And they had a psychoactive substance that is documented. It's documented. It's in the historical record. It was punishable by death if you mentioned it, which is probably why it lasted for 2,000 years. But, even slaves and women could partake of that substance. So it sort of transcended politics itself. There's all the sort of druidic sort of cultures through Britain and in Eurasia. There was the magic mushroom and all these other different substances. In India, in the Vedic sort of traditions, they had the soma. They had, things that altered their consciousness, which is in their holy books. there seems to be a lot of evidence coming out lately once we get over the social and institutional sort of dogmas, which point sort of to the fact that most of the world's religions had some psychoactive element to them. Even if you look at cannabis, spelled with a K, K-A-N-B-I-S, was one of the substances used to anoint the Messiah or the Holy One in the Old Testament. They'd use this secretion, this substance where they would rub it over the body and it would have a psychoactive effect. And that was, it's all documented. It's just that the truth is hidden amongst the fine print, I guess, in all these different cultures. And now there seems to be a resurgence in interest, and anthropologically and historically, all these things are on record, and we can look at it with a more objective eye now.
Didn't the Greeks used to have like a spot you went to trip out to, like a Pan?
Are you thinking?
Well, the Greeks had a few things. There was the Oracle at Delphi, which was a location in Greece, and there was a crevice in the ground which fumes would come up from. And the Oracle, who was a woman, would sort of straddle the crevice, but there was something in the fumes that would alter consciousness. And then she would sort of the theory was that she would give readings of the future, and she would say pronunciations about future events from that alteration of consciousness. But this is a thing, not just that, but indigenous cultures all around the world and tribal cultures, and even cultures which then became more city-based and grew away from their relationship with nature, they still all remember that, altering consciousness is part of the human birthright, and there's been so many traditions which became sort of formalized more as religious traditions. And then as the priestcraft took over, the original sacrament was sort of usually, edited out. And then we've ended up with this sort of fossilization of dogmas. But all of these original streams had, some original catalyst to them.
Yeah. And that was the Kaikion at the Eleusinian Mysteries, kind of the name of the sacrament that was used there for. Yeah, it was well over 2,000 years they used that. I think it was more like 2,500 years. So that says a lot. If a sacrament was kind of used as an initiatory mystery school at that time of such high antiquity and high Renaissance. So I think in past times, we've really done things in better ways than we do them now, and we've kind of lost track of some of that lineage of our kind of entheogenic past in terms of kind of spirituality.
It also brings to the fore the idea that, what is civilization and what is a culture? If you go all the way down to a tribal level, they have survival amongst them, and, they're born into it over many, many generations. But usually then they have an ideology, and we need, we're doing this recording on Election Day in America, and it's like, what is it that bonds, culture together? It's like you have something like the American dream, or you have something that brings you together. And in many of these original cultures, they had an authentic experience. They had a connection with nature, and in altering their consciousness, not in ways that we think of just to shift consciousness, but to bring them back into a relationship with nature and to expand their consciousness, to give them an understanding of what they were embedded in and what, life really was. And then they could live in right relationship. And that itself was often a survival mechanism. But, these cultures would often, and it still happens today in the Amazon basin, many cultures take things like ayahuasca together, and they share a group experience, a group bonding that really transcends what we have, which is sort of politics, religion, and Facebook, So it's like these things can really be a lot more, bring a lot more depth to what it means to be a culture and to have these unified experiences between you.
Yeah, I never really realized until a couple of years ago the wide variety of these natural plant medicines. I only thought of like mushrooms, and I don't even know if I knew of that many back then. All of a sudden I'm realizing there's 10, 20 different types that people are...
I always knew peyote because it was in remember those old Billy the Kid movies? Emilio Estevez was Billy the Kid. They ate the peyote. I was like, I love those movies when I was a kid, so I knew what peyote was, like, before I even smoked pot.
Wasn't there an episode of The Simpsons where Homer had some psychedelic hot chili or something?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I remember that too. Homer's had a couple psychedelic experiences, yeah. Now I'm going to have to dig that out.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point to highlight the separation of a culture that's, like something in the industrialized first world or the Western world that might have had some experiences with entheogens or what you might call, hasn't had this lineage to shamanism to kind of put the experience into the kind of proper container. So maybe I'm sure that most of your guys' listeners on this show, it's a pretty kind of sophisticated crowd, but are familiar with what shamanism is. But maybe we'll just have kind of Rak give the kind of separation between taking medicine or an earth-based medicine in the context of a shaman versus just doing it, willy-nilly in those contexts.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because, the Western idea of what a shaman is, what shamanism is, has, evolved over the last half century or so. But if you go to indigenous cultures, the shaman is a very specialized role. Most indigenous cultures will have their hunters and gatherers, and they may have chieftains, or they may have sort of various levels of hierarchy. But the shaman's sort of outside of all that as well. It's someone who has a foot in both worlds and works on behalf of the village, mediating their health and their relationship with nature. It's often seen as a healer in the West. When the early 20th century sort of anthropology was studying different medicines and different peoples across the world, they would see that all these different cultures had a medicine person, and they was responsible for the health of their tribe and mediating their right relationships. But the West basically threw all that together under the blanket term shaman, which originally came from the word saman, which was part of Siberian medicine work. And since then, we've had this brand. It's almost become this idea of what is a shaman. It's a very mythic archetype in the West, especially because we've had the absence of the shaman. We basically killed our shamans. We killed our witches and our herbalists and our medicine people. 500 years ago, Western culture, whether that was the British or the Spanish or the Portuguese, as they went over to the first world again and to cultures like South America, and they found cultures which were using entheogenic plants or plants which expand consciousness, they considered them the work of the devil. And so they tried to kill them off as well. And so it basically resulted in the fact that we had an absence of the shaman in our culture.
That's a pretty apt description, actually. I haven't heard it described that way before, how we killed off our shaman, but it makes a lot of sense.
That's kind of what I was going to ask, is how this whole clamp down on our sovereignty of our consciousness, right? Like Graham Hancock would say, like, we deserve sovereignty over our own consciousness. Like, how much of that was done on purpose, or was it intentional, or was it just a matter of the way the West was sort of created? Like, did it happen sort of by accident, just as we evolve?
Well, there was lots of forces at work. Mainly it was, forces of religion hundreds of years ago. And those forces of religion saw anything outside of themselves, out of their way to approach God, or their cultural, approach was wrong or evil. And then we've inherited that Judeo-Christian sort of religion and that sort of energy. And it's really had a bias towards anything which is outside of the usual sort of spectrum of existence. Anything which, even now we have a war on not just psychoactive plants, but a war on herbs and a war on plants themselves, because we have a pharmaceutical industry now that has an incredible vested interest in the money and in using artificial things which have patents on them and chemicals which affect us and have contraindications. But we basically have a war on nature. This is it. It's basically we've distanced ourselves from nature and from knowing the right rhythms, and we've been living in cities, and now over 51% of people in the world live in cities. It's a majority of humanity now live in these concrete urban environments, and we don't have an inbuilt relationship with nature. We've forgotten what it means, and so we're reestablishing that. And so this reawakening and this interest again in not just psychoactive plant medicines, but herbs and things that nature can give us. And you look at permaculture, and you look at going back to the land and establishing right relationships. This sort of feels to me about what it's all about. It's not even just about like shamanic awakening or a spiritual awakening. It's about us awakening to the fact that we live on a planet that's not in a city, and we need to, be in relationship with it.
So you must have seen that change quite a bit over the last decade since you've been involved in this for so long now. I mean, unless we've been in a bubble over the last few years, but it seems like there's a huge increase, and even like
we're definitely in somewhat of a self-induced bubble.
We are, but I mean, I keep bumping into people that have gone down to South America and they've tried this, and then there's all these festivals the festivals seem to be more and more popular, and it seems to overlap with this culture as well. So it must be growing. I mean, is there a chance that, I don't know, is there a hope for it to overtake the war on nature?
The dominant patriarchal culture, which has led us to the brink of extinction and is killing us slowly all over the planet. Yes, there is a hope. But this is the thing. It's like, okay, if you want the big picture, it's like basically, I mean, here's a big hello. The Earth is alive. And it's not only it's alive, it has a sentience or a sapience or some type of active intelligence which basically grooms and grows the species on the Earth to be in maybe not always cooperation, but to move energy around and to be in synergy. So, ecosystems and natural systems are meant to be flowing energy from one to the other. And, our waters and our forests and our air, all of them work together. It's like, so the plants and the condensation cycle and the air cycle, nature knows what she's doing. And she has made all her species, including humans, which, somewhere along the line seem like we've fallen out of balance. And so that falling out of balance seems to be as long as recorded history in the last 10,000 years or so, or as Terence McKenna used to call it, his story, because it's written by the victors. The story of what happens in history is written by those who have the power and have the money and have controlled the vested interests. And if we look at what's happening in the world today, we are living in the crescendo, the tail end of history of all that's come before, and we fucked up the planet, excuse my French. We've actually fallen out of right relationship. We've poisoned the waters. We've poisoned the earth. We've taken out all the natural resources. Like, if you think of the earth as a macro organism, like a large-scale single organism with all these other organisms which are the species within it. And if you look at our human body, imagine if you started to take out all the calcium, or just all your proteins, or all like one bit out of your body. Your body's going to go into like cardiac arrest and start shutting down. It's going to start to try to fight the infection. So potentially what's happening from the planet on a more Gaian holistic level as the planet as a whole is that she's actually fighting back and having an immune response syndrome. She's actually, secreting these substances which have been out there for a while, and things like ayahuasca, yes, they have really skyrocketed in popular understanding in the last decade or so, precisely because they work, and they are a bit of a immune response syndrome from the planet herself, and they can give a very short, sharp whack to the head to wake you up. And the thing is, we don't have a lot of time. We're in this slow march over the cliff, or the analogy of if you throw a frog in boiling water, it'll jump out. But if you slowly boil the water, it'll, if you just replace one president with the next, and one crooked company with the next crooked company, and one bad law with the next bad law, eventually things just get so worse, people don't see it, or they don't have a trigger point where they realize it's so bad. But we have a trigger point. We know that the environment is in rapid transformation and degradation. We know the amount of oxygen level, CO2 levels in the air. We know all of these things which science is telling us are at a really critical level, and things are not going to be the same. And the thing is, what is it that's happening? Planet Earth is changing. We're part of planet Earth. And by taking substances like ayahuasca, or the Sonoran desert toad, which is the subject of our documentary, or San Pedro cactus, or Salvia divinorum, or psilocybin mushrooms, or you name the dozens and dozens of plants which are secreted by the planet herself and are designed for mammals to use. And what do? They reveal within us that we have these relationships with nature. They expand our consciousness to bring us back to the levels that we perhaps once had when we were in synergy with nature, before we got sick, before the fall of consciousness. And, it's an emergency here on planet Earth. And these are not things to be taken lightly. There's a great trust and a great responsibility in using these substances. But overall, I think the planet herself is saying, wake the fuck up.
Yeah, it's so sad that we don't hear about this on the mainstream media. Like when I watched your the first episode there, I guess that was about the Sonoran frog, right? Or desert toad, I guess you would call it. The guy Octavio or whoever has been doing that he's done it to so many people, right? I mean, so many people have gone through this process. Many of them healed through many things, including addiction. You know, we should be hearing more about this. You know, somewhere else in the mainstream a bit.
Yeah, so episode 1 features the work of Dr. Octavio Rettig. He's a Mexican-trained doctor who had his own battle with addiction. He was a crack addict off and on for many years, and as part of that, he sort of went back to his Mexican heritage, and he was working with some other plant-based medicines like, it wasn't ayahuasca, I think there was San Pedro cactus and others, to help him try to kick his addiction. And eventually he was introduced to the Bufo alvarius, or the Sonoran desert toad, which is native to the north of Mexico in the Sonoran desert region. And, you know, he had a great success in kicking his own addiction to crystal meth or to crack. And from that, he realized that these substances were more powerful for him than Western pharmaceuticals, which only masked the problem or created another problem and was sort of part of the problem. You know, it was like that these substances can help re-engineer your own relationship to health, and they can help you see what's at the root cause of your addiction. There's a very famous Western doctor called Dr. Gabor Mate, who's been working with ayahuasca the last few years. But for 20 years or so in Canada, you might know of him. He's been working with addiction and addiction therapy and recovery. And, you know, he says basically at the root of all addiction is trauma. And a lot of times it goes back to early childhood trauma, things like that, sexual trauma, and that there's something in our emotional bodies which is causing us to lash out and to act out in this way to try to you know, fill the gap or cover over the pain. There's pain. You know, we're experiencing this thing of this disconnection from our natural state. And so these substances, it's not just that they have a physical effect. Quite often what they do, say with things like ayahuasca, is that they also reveal what's in your subconscious mind and they bring it up to the fore, or they work on the emotional body. So things that you've been holding onto and carrying with you, even if you're consciously aware of it or not, that really becomes very obvious, and it comes up and it is dealt with by the conscious mind. And that then gets to the root cause of the addiction. So all these Western pharmaceuticals that they give us, whether they have an addiction interrupting capacity or not, they're just more and more chemicals, and they're creating a chemical dependency on our physical bodies, which quite often doesn't deal with the emotional problem. For that, they'll give you Prozac or another pharmaceutical, you know, that keeps you doped up as well. So these substances from the earth, these shamanic medicines, can help you get in touch with your own inner shamanic core, your own ability to be your own medicine. And you're not just taking something to fix you, you're getting in touch with your soul, essentially. And then you're starting to work on your own relationship with yourself.
Yeah, and the legal drugs now are killing for years. Legal drugs have been killing people by overdose more than the illegal drugs, which is saying something about big pharma and the hole that's making. Now, is there any chance of addiction to these types of drugs in themselves? I mean, I've heard of some people that have gotten rid of chronic pot addictions or other type of addictions, but then you hear they've been on 50 or 60 of these, weekend episode type things. I mean, is there a chance that becomes a problem?
No. I mean, I've never heard of anyone saying they're addicted to ayahuasca or addicted to the Bufo alvarius toad. These are incredibly strong medicines. I mean, they're strong on a psychic level, on what your consciousness experiences, what it reveals. They're not something you do lightly. They're not recreational. You can't just go out and party on them. They're incredibly profoundly transformative tools of consciousness itself. And, you know, they have a built-in sort of equilibrium to them, in that you physically can't take too much of these substances. I mean, you're not going to necessarily overdose on them because they're natural substances. And in a lot of the shamanic communities and people I talk with, they say that these things, because, you know, the Bufo alvarius toad, for instance, you know, it spends 9 months of the year underground in the earth, nurturing its venom sacs, which contain bufotenine and 5-MeO-DMT, which is also native to the human brain. But, you know, the medicine that's in its body, which when it comes up above the earth for a few months, it can be harvested from it. It doesn't hurt the toad. It can be milked and dried, and then that substance can be smoked. But these things, they're natural substances. So our bodies recognize the fact that these are other natural substances. So they're not artificial chemicals. And there's a built-in tolerance level.
And
now,
receptors
there are warnings for people, in shamanic ceremonies. There's duty of care and there's health things you need to look out for in terms of contraindications with different substances and how they work. But if those things are adhered to and taken care of, I feel in general they're a lot more safe than artificial pharmaceuticals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Niles, what was it like for you?
Yeah, and the thing about them is that, ultimately you can... Go ahead.
No, keep going. Keep going.
There's a slight delay there.
I was just going to add to that, ultimately you can only really heal you, through your own will. So like these kind of shamanic medicines, these earth-based medicines, which we're kind of highlighting on the show, and the concept for the show, like Rak mentioned, is to have each episode focus on a specific medicine and a specific medicine person. It's like you can only heal you, but these are fabulous catalysts for healing, and healing not so much in the Western sense of like, I'm sick, I have a cold, I need medicine, but a major part of healing is kind of coming into wholeness, which is understanding some of the things that, Rak has highlighted in terms of consciousness expansion and, not living in a kind of world that's destroying their planet or, X, Y, and Z. So it's much more of a broader, wider sense in terms of the word healing. It's not just a physical sickness, but it's more or less kind of a global or, societal mental sickness.
Yeah.
You know what would happen in ancient China? Apparently, the rich families would have their own in-house doctors, but the doctor would only get paid and remain on staff if people remained well. They weren't called on to fix a cold or to fix a problem. If something went wrong, then they would get in trouble. And it's like, this is, I think, is what we're going through. We're having to revolutionize and see that essentially our entire modern culture is sick. It's completely out of alignment with integrity of right relationship with the planet, with ourselves. It's driven by money. It's driven by pharmaceutical interests, invested interests. And it's like we just need to wipe the slate clean. And, when we have a shamanic experience with these earth-based medicines, they're incredibly profound transformers of consciousness. And, for people that have experienced it, you can talk about it. For people that haven't experienced it, it's almost like trying to describe having sex with someone, right? It's like, it's very intimate and it's very personal. And on the outside, one of the challenges of making documentary films about shamanic experiences is that when you film the experience itself, the ceremony itself, you're only getting the outside flesh body. You're seeing the person either roll around or go through some type of somatic body effect. Yeah. But that's sort of just the after effect, or you're seeing them process energy. You're seeing them in very intimate situation, but you're just seeing what's happening on the outside. On the inside is what it's all about. On the inside, using your intuition and your connection to what you're going through, is you're connecting to other states of being. And this is what tribal cultures, indigenous cultures understand, is that we are embedded in their cosmology. The physical world is embedded in an energetic ecology. And that energetic ecology we might call the astral, or, in modern quantum physics, we might say hyperdimensions or other dimensions. But it has its own energetics. It has its own perhaps entities or beings that live there. It has its own place, and it interacts with us and it's part of us. And we need to learn how to interact with it. But these are very profound experiences which have for 100 years or more in the West been just discarded with the term hallucination.
Yeah.
When LSD was first used in the late 40s and early 50s in psychotherapy before it was illegal, one of the terms they gave it was psychomimetic, which meant that it induced what was considered to be psychosis. But in indigenous cultures, they don't have psychosis. They do not have crazy people traditionally, because both they are supported by the tribe and they are understood. And there are often, people in indigenous cultures which have variances away from the normal capacity for consciousness. They might be sensitive to certain things, or they might have, just different abilities. But those people are usually nurtured in their tribe. And the ones who are really sensitive are made their shamans, are made their medicine people. They see that they have a sensitivity for them, and they give them the role and responsibility of using that sensitivity to connect with the subtle energetics of the energetic ecology we're embedded in, and to use those skills on behalf of their tribe. In our culture, we label people crazy and we medicate them. because we're crazy. There's a J. Krishnamurti quote. It's no accomplishment to be, adjusted to an insane society and call yourself sane. It's like we've totally got it round the wrong way in our culture.
Yeah, well, thankfully things are changing. So, Niles, what was it like? I was going to ask you about kind of what Rak was just talking about. People filming people for this documentary in their some of their most vulnerable moments. Like, that's one of the things that shocked me. Is you guys got it's a lot of pretty intense footage of people going through these experiences.
Yeah. Well, thank you, man. I mean, it's some of the most kind of profound stuff that I've shot to date, because I have kind of a background as one of my kind of primary art forms that I love to do in my spare time is street photography, which is a very kind of candid form of, photographing people without necessarily knowing it on the street. And this show is kind of shot in a street photography style where it's just kind of me observing in a documentary fashion in this kind of candid street photography way, but then also trying to highlight in a cinematic kind of beautiful portrayal some of these amazing experiences people are going through. So in this episode, I mean, some of the footage is so amazing. Like the episode concludes in a ceremony, for example, that has numerous things in it that I think have probably never really been filmed before, or at least not in this way, or not at this like level of production value. So that documenting of that stuff just kind of happens to come about because of kind of the structure of the nature of how the show had been made, through kind of Rak's ties and connections to the community, and kind of knowing Octavio and having a background, having done the medicine with Octavio, and kind of choosing Octavio as the subject for the first episode, which is a big responsibility that Rak has to kind of highlight who are we going to highlight per episode, because we obviously want to focus on somebody that's a very honorable, kind of balanced person, and none of these medicine people that we highlight per episode would be perfect. But then sharing their lives kind of in a filmmaking sense on the documentary front, as kind of documentary filmmakers, is what we're trying to do with the show. And I think the first episode did that pretty effectively, and I think we're pretty proud of what came out of it.
Yeah, it was a really good balance between that raw street photography style and a professional appearance. Like, I think you guys did a really good job. So what's next? What's the next episode you guys are going to do? Like, what, you're doing a different one on different type of medicine with a different sort of shamanic healer there?
Yeah, I think we mentioned it a little bit before, but essentially there are lots of different shamanic medicines. The term that was invented for this in the 80s, it was entheogen, which was to distance it a bit from the psychedelics and more man-made chemicals. And it comes from the Greek. It means to invoke the divine within, which may sound a bit grandiose, but I mean, some of these things you can really have very profound experiences on them like that. So the first episode came about, as Niles said, because I also sat with and experienced the Buffalo Various Toad medicine with Dr. Octavio Rettig. And there are many other practitioners within the global shamanic community. And this is the thing, basically I've been for a decade or so involved with the ayahuasca community worldwide. I've got 2 books and a documentary out on ayahuasca. And what I was noticing from that, my original intention to go down to Peru in 2006, which was the same year that National Geographic Adventure put its cover story out on ayahuasca. And since then, every mainstream media outlet in the world pretty much has covered ayahuasca and the interest in it. And my original intent was to look at, well, what is the role of the shaman in the 21st century and why is that important? And it's sort of still the same central question for this show. And so what I've noticed is it's not just ayahuasca, though. On the coattails, in a sense, of the popularity of ayahuasca, many indigenous cultures around the world have been caretakers for these medicines and still use them. And many different cultures, like in Mexico, there's the psilocybin mushrooms. And, that's actually probably, the West's first major entheogen or shamanic medicine, because back in the 1950s, Gordon Wassoon, who was an investment banker and vice president of JP Morgan at the time and an amateur mycologist, he went down to Mexico in search of the magic mushroom and then eventually reported on it for Life magazine, which came out in 1957. And that sort of predated the LSD revolution in the 60s. And, the Native American curanderas, or the medicine women who work with the magic mushrooms, they're in Mexico. Mexico has a lot of these substances. The Sonoran desert toad is there. The Aliliquai, or the morning glory seeds, are around that region as well. But all over Mexico, South America, Australia has many DMT-containing acacia plants. There's the Siberian Amanita muscaria, the red and white sort of dotted mushroom, which almost every year invariably I see in my Facebook feeds. You'll see these stories about the true origins of Christmas, and basically the Siberian shamans. If you can't eat the Amanita muscaria mushroom raw, or you can die. It can poison the liver. But the reindeers of Siberia would eat the mushroom, and then the Siberian shamans would actually drink reindeer urine because the reindeers' livers would process it. And a lot of the origins of like the flying reindeers and all the Christmas sort of origins seem to come from that central sort of source. But there's those, as we mentioned on top of the show, peyote in North America with the Native American Indians. San Pedro cactus is also in North America and in parts of Central America and across the world. These substances, in fact, seem to be secreted by the planet herself in different bioregions, and due to the increase in popularity of shamanism now, people are also grafting and growing them in the right climates around the world. And the idea of the show is to focus on different practitioners who work with these different medicines in different areas around the world in the global village, and to see, not just what are the effects of this medicine and watch people taking them, but to really focus on what is the role of the shaman in the 21st century, what are the pitfalls, what are the problems they experience, how is this resurgence in the shamanic archetype affecting people and the communities that they work with. Yeah.
Niles, do you have anything to say about that? Huh. Niles? I don't know if he's still there.
And it cut out there for my thing because I know my side of the conversation's a little choppy here, but go ahead and ask again.
I was going to say Dr. Octavio had some sort of UN permit as well. So, I mean, us living in this bubble in North America, not realizing that a lot of the globe is a little bit more open to this. I mean, that's pretty positive to see.
Yeah, the toad, the medicine toad is 5-MeO-DMT, and it's actually only illegal in 7 countries throughout the world. In the rest of the world, it's totally legal.
There you go. Is Canada?
You can get the toad in Canada?
I do believe that Canada is legal. Yeah. But, we must distinguish. It's not 5-MeO is actually endogenous to the human brain. It's something which is part of consciousness itself. Tryptamines, which 5-MeO is one of. There's pinealine, there's N,N-dimethyltryptamine, and 5-methoxy dimethyltryptamine. Serotonin, they go down the serotonin pathways. These are things which are very inimical to the human consciousness itself. It's like they're at the root of part of what helps us navigate in consciousness itself. Dr. Rick Strassman did these tests with N,N-dimethyltryptamine over 20 years ago now, which is recounted in the book DMT, The Spirit Molecule. And the theory is that these things are, you can get a surge of DMT at birth or at death or at near-death experiences, and people often see things like the white light tunnel. So N,N-dimethyltryptamine, they say, might be the thing which helps mediate us going into the dreaming each night and going into that sort of realm of consciousness. And 5-MeO-DMT is essentially what mystics throughout history have described as the white light tunnel, and that rejoining of that sense of the divine or source, or going back to that oceanic experience of consciousness itself. But it's not just in the toad, it's actually, in the human organism. And the toad it's not quite an endangered species, but it is in very small supply, and the region of the desert that it is native to is also the Mexican drug cartels sort of territory. So there's a lot of supply and demand issues, and there's a lot of issues around protecting the toad and making sure that its conservation is a priority. But essentially, 5-MeO-DMT, which is the key compound in the toad that's discussed in episode 1, that substance is not illegal in most countries of the world. These things can often be in a grey area of the law. It doesn't mean that they're actually illegal. It just means that they're not illegal. Basically, Richard Nixon brought this all in with the 1971 Psychotropic Drug Convention, which was designed to sort of counteract the LSD revolution of the 60s, which was a direct threat to the establishment because it totally changed the social dynamics. There's been tests with LSD that have been done on rats, and they say that if you give one rat LSD and put it back into the cage with the other rats basically kill it. And not because it's on LSD, but because it doesn't adhere to the social norm and to the subtle signals that all the other rats give off. And if you're not going to play the culture game and the societal game, well, then you're a threat. So, LSD had this big revolution, essentially, in the 1960s, which really changed the course of history. And because of that, Richard Nixon instigated the war on drugs, and throughout the 70s, also the cocaine and crack wars and the CIA and all those all the other nefarious dealings that they did under the covers. But the United Nations signatory countries essentially inherited this, and some of the only people or countries that were able to filter that out were the ones that lobbied that they should keep their indigenous plant medicines, which are essentially the shamanic medicines, things like coca and ayahuasca and things like that, which weren't signatory or weren't subject to that overarching law. And so because of that, and sometimes under Analog Act loopholes, these shamanic medicines have managed to survive into the modern day. And, indigenous peoples all around the world still take them. It's only that it's new to Western people as we come back into the fold and come back into relationship with these medicines. And so there are opportunities for people to go to countries like Peru and partake of these medicines, or perhaps if they are not illegal in their native country. But usually the other thing you've got to really remember is there is a lineage to these things and there is a correct way to do them. And just because they may be not illegal, we're not really suggesting people rush off and find a toad and try to smoke it themselves. There's definitely a duty of care and a right way to do these things, and there's guidance that is needed in learning to approach them.
You keep answering my question right before I'm about to ask it, and that was, do you guys have advice for people that just want to smoke DMT? Like, let's say they've ordered it from a reputable friend, or they found some, and they want they want to just smoke some DMT. Is that do you have any advice for people that want to do that?
Say it's been kicking around for over a year.
Yeah, well, obviously, we do not condone doing anything illegal, even if Richard Nixon instigated these illegal laws to begin with. I don't know if you're saying you've got some DMT in your brain and you'd like to know how to activate it. We know what you can do. You can go in a darkness ritual for 10 to 14 days, and your brain will spontaneously start to secrete these tryptamines. But in regards to external chemical DMT, maybe check out Erowid, EROWID.org. It's a not-for-profit that's been around about 20 years, and it has a lot of information around chemicals and drug usage. There is a little bit of, there's a lot of overlap, but essentially, even if you look on sites like, if you look on social media, and there are so many sort of psychedelic sites and shamanic sites and plant medicine sites, funnily enough, the psychonauts or the psychedelic sites seem to outnumber the shamanic medicine ones about 10 to 1 on the likes and the hits. There seems to be an incredible, audience out there who are interested in psychedelics, which at the moment, the Western tradition for that is really steering towards reabsorbing it back into the medical model. There's organizations like MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies, who are having their 30th anniversary conference next April in Oakland, California. Mm-hmm. And they've been working with scientists and doctors and the government to do legal tests with psychedelic substances for people. Unfortunately, they usually have to do them on people who are terminally ill or at late stages of cancer or things like that, because that's the very narrow bandwidth the government and the FDA allows them to do it in. But essentially, there's great interest in psychedelics, and there's lots of different organizations around, and there's lots of community organizations which can you can look into, and they can help you have support and structure and community for exploring the psychedelic world. There's also, it's sort of like a brother and sister team. There's a related sort of shamanic community, which, because of the nature of the beast, and sometimes these ceremonies can be, if not illegal, they're still sort of in a grey area of the law, and so there's sort of an underground shamanic community. But there's definitely a global community that does these substances. But there's a whole different set and setting, to use Tim Leary's old term about taking psychedelics. There's a whole different context that they're done in. There's traditionally It's not necessarily something that you just take and that, you know, you're on a drug or you don't have any support mechanism or you're doing recreationally. Shamanic substances essentially are best done as a part of a ritual or, as Niles said earlier, as part of a container. So, you know, one of the great things that I've seen come out of the ayahuasca movement and be taken up globally is not just the idea of ayahuasca itself, but the idea of ceremony, the idea that there's a facilitator, whether that's a shaman or not. And in the West, there's a whole generation now of shamanic facilitators that don't necessarily have the experience of indigenous shamans that, you know, from an early age they're chosen and they're on very arduous dietas and reducing what foods they eat to increase their sensitivity to work with plants. And they might train as shamans for literally decades to get the requisite experience to feel like they can help heal people. But there has been in the last 10 or 20 years or so a whole generation of sort of neo-shamanic facilitators that are on the shamanic path and are learning and doing their best to be facilitators of the medicine and to hold space, to hold a container for ceremony itself. And the idea of an ayahuasca circle or things like that is now transcending just the thing that you take. It's the idea of the community coming together, having this container of a night where you take this substance, this sacred shamanic medicine as part of the community, and you go on your individual journey and you have your intent that you know, might be working on an individual healing or something you want to work on. But there's a great synergy and a great sort of cohesion when people come together in a ritual and do this work versus just taking it alone. So there's a growth in both the psychedelic communities and the shamanic communities, and there's a lot of overlap, but there's a slightly different ways that it can be approached.
Yeah, and that kind of reminds me of thinking of like the LSD revolution of the 60s, you know, where we had people dropping acid in Golden Gate Park, but it was such a culture that was so new to a sacrament that it hadn't had the time to learn how to work with it in a shamanistic practice because it was such a short-lived history of that chemical. So, you know, LSD, which is the chemical component of, is very similar to the morning glory seeds. And, you know, indigenous culture would have usage of those seeds over hundreds, if not thousands of years, where they would have had the time to learn how to shamanize it properly and then put it in that container. So the person taking it gets way more out of it and, you know, has a much more high rate of having either an expansion consciousness or healing. So that's kind of, yeah, that's well said.
I wonder, I mean, it's bad enough that the war on drugs and the demonization has caused enough problems just by making these substances taboo and harder to get. But I wonder how many generations it'll take to kind of, you know, like even now, you know, people get bad trips for different reasons, but I often wonder how much just the fact that in the back of your head, you know, you're breaking some fucking law that could send you to jail, like that's got to play some sort of a role in your experience. You're not like taking them in the fruit freedom.
It definitely creates a negative imprint in people. But again, that's really why I think the shamanic community globally is so important as well, because you have a sense of well-being and belonging. And you know that, you know, with the right container and if you're with the right people, you're doing something which is exercising your own right to consciousness, but you're also partaking of substances which have a lineage that goes back to indigenous cultures and connects to the planet and to all these tribes around the planet. And you're plugging back into something which is sacred. And it's not about drugs. It's not about breaking the law. It's about your own right to plug back into sacred. I mean, what a world we live in where the sacredness of life itself is illegal, where it's like, you know, they say that the law should not be able to differentiate between the container which contains the substance and the substance itself. So if we have NN-DMT and 5-MeO-DMT in our own brains, how is that any different from the toad? You know, how is that any different from plants which contain these substances? And in a sense, we're just sort of accentuating or deepening our own relationship with these pathways of the divine. But it's definitely something which, if you're part of a shamanic lineage, it is a medicine culture, and it's a culture sometimes which may have rules, it may have structure, it may have ways that you are meant to accurately and sort of more honorably work with these medicines. And there can be, especially around things like ayahuasca, there's dietary rules, there's ways to maximize your approach to the medicine, there's things to watch out for. And all of that means preparation. It means you have to approach it in a more mature way, in a more respectful way. and that you're also connected to a lineage that is teaching you the way. And so it's really coming back into that global family of shamanic practitioners.
How much is the
and that,
go ahead, Niles.
Go ahead, man. Oh, I was just going to say, and that's kind of what we're trying to highlight per episode on the show is, for example, like Octavio, who's the highlight of the first episode, is somebody that, is technically a Westerner. I mean, he's a Mexican, and his primary language is Mexican as a Western trained general practitioner. But he has worked with the indigenous community. So he's kind of had that, I guess you want to say, training or maybe even initiation into the indigenous people who have had once a legacy with the shaman. That's kind of a good thing to highlight and try and focus on per episode, is that kind of that dynamic where each episode hopefully will focus on somebody who may be a Westerner but has done it through the lineage of the indigenous community. Right.
That's a good point. So how much is with the increase of all this this interest in psychedelics and entheogens, how is the whole festival scene played a role in that, or are they totally connected and they're going alongside each other, like things like Burning Man and these other music festivals? Like I've only been to one recently, but it does remind me of sort of a neo-shamanistic thing with people like with the music and the bass and the beats and the whole environment there.
It's definitely connected, but you know where all that springs from. Basically, the whole modern conscious festival communities and the Burning Man and all the other like global festivals. You get a boom in Portugal, all through Europe they have electronic music festivals. Here in Australia they do. America there's huge festivals as well. But that is all a direct legacy, essentially, of Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters doing the acid tests. Uh-huh. The acid tests in the 60s were the first example of this reclamation of this archaic ritual of trance dancing to like strobe lights and to electronic music or amplified music, and to come back into a tribal group gathering. That's the real legacy of the acid test, and that was through acid. But it then went to Goa in India. A lot of the hippies that were turned on to LSD in the late 60s went over to India and Goa. That actually formed the whole Goa electronic music scene, which then came back to London. And then there was the second Summer of Love in 88, 89 over there. That was then carried over to America in the early 90s and became, by the mid to late 90s, the rave movement. And the successive waves over generational time of, people embracing altered consciousness. And that has now blossomed into the global festival culture that we see all around the planet. So these places can definitely be sort of containers for not just altered, definitely altered states, but not just that you take something to go in an altered state. If you've been to Burning Man, it's an altered state in itself. Yeah. It's the reclamation of what Terence McKenna used to call the archaic revival. Here's a culture which goes out there onto the playa and they build everything, they take everything away again. But when you're there, it induces an altered state because it's outside the norms of society. It's outside the normal parameters, and it's a ritual. It's a giant shamanic ritual. And this is the thing, shamanism isn't, just contained in substances. It's a state of mind. It's a state of being. Mm. And so when we go in what's called liminal zones, or zones which are outside the normal parameters of culture, which is really work orientated and 9 to 5, and it's got white picket fence type ideology to it. You go outside of that, and then you end up in these liminal zones where you get to express yourself, you get to make art, you get to dance, you get to make love. I don't know. It's these zones of freedom. It's these zones which actually go all the way back to what indigenous cultures would do when they had that ability to connect nature. Here in Australia, with the Australian Aborigines, they would have these corroborees, which were these intertribal gatherings, every year or so at different seasonal junctures. And they were parties. They were parties and celebration and feasts, just like the pagans have feasts around certain, times of year, which are celebrating seasonal shifts. And in the West, all those seasonal shifts have been, subverted and turned into sugar-fueled festivals celebrating, Easter Bunny or Father Christmas or things like that. They've totally made it into mercantile gift giving and money, when originally it's all about the planet. And so when you look at festival culture, it's still about the planet. You go outside the cities, you go back to nature, you celebrate. You celebrate the joy of being alive and of coming together as a community. So it's definitely related.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah, I mean that's the feeling I got. Is it was more of a gathering
about
than
festivals.
Go ahead, Niles.
Oh, sorry, man. I was just going to. One thing about festivals is that they're quite kind of a pilgrimage as well, and nothing with great reward doesn't come with a little bit of kind of risk and trial and tough work, I would say. So I've found that anytime I've been at a festival, there's been interesting kind of synchronistic things that have happened in life because you made the effort to get there. So that's kind of just another layer of the icing on the cake to add to what Rak just said. So go ahead, man.
Yeah, definitely. No, I was going to say it feels like they're more than just a venue for using entheogens or something like that, or experiencing altered state. It really is an environment where people can be themselves and be free and get together with other sort of loving, like-minded people. It just, you leave all the garbage at home, and that's what it felt like for me. And I've only been to like one of them, but so Rak, can you give us an example? Like, can we get a little bit granular on somebody's experience, like an experience of healing, or what a typical experience of healing might go through for these? Because it's not people just going down there and having these experiences. There are profound changes, like worldview changes and huge life changes from these. Can you give us a couple examples so people understand the just sort of the importance of it?
The other thing is, like, all the different shamanic entheogens can have varied effects.
Right.
The subject of episode 1, which is the Sonoran desert toad, is pretty much like the Tyrannosaurus Rex of entheogens. It's like the king of them all, in the sense that it's so incredibly profound. It's probably the strongest entheogen on the planet, and it's not a macho thing to say that. Well, they're all initiations, but this one is a very specific initiation. It's I mentioned before, it's like the white light mystic tunnel. This sense of rejoining the source, or this oceanic sort of sense of unconditional love. And these are just words. And obviously on your own internal experience with this medicine, you will have your own words for it. But invariably, it's a sense of the divine. And this is something which is so, censored and shied away from, and culturally almost unrecognized anymore. This sense of the divine. We can say things like psychedelics, we can say things like medicines, we can say indigenous and all these other buzzwords. Mm-hmm. But if you get to the heart of it and you say, well, what's the experience of the Sonoran desert toad? It's an experience of the divine, and not just external to you, but internal to you, that you are a divine vehicle for the expression of divine energies on the earth. And that can really put a lot of people off. They're used to people talking about ayahuasca and seeing visions and seeing maybe snakes, or seeing fractal geometries like a DMT vision, mm-hmm. or experiencing entities, or seeing madre ayahuasca, or having an incredible healing experience and healing their cancer or tumor or their emotional relationship with their parents. And that's all good and well. But I mean, each of these different entheogens will have a varied effect. And, I find that the Sonoran desert toad is the most profound medicine that I've experienced in a shamanic setting. That the medicine that it gives is this reconnection to source, and that is an incredible healing experience that then trickles down through your body, through your consciousness, and can have a somatic body effect. I call it like God's factory reset. It can often seem to flush clean your whole body back to sort of a natural state of being. But essentially, I mean, people have to be ready for these substances. They're not just for the average person off the street, because it's so shocking to the ideology of the person who takes them, which is why so many of these substances have cultures which teach us how to use them and can prepare us, for what it may entail. They can be quite shocking, because it reveals that the world is bigger than we thought, and that there is more to it than we thought. And that in itself can have a big effect on people's psyches.
Yeah.
Huh. I never considered.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a good thing to highlight about, the show too, is as documentary filmmakers, I mean, we're trying to comment on how there's cons with these things as well. Nothing's perfect, and the shamanistic community has its strengths and its weaknesses, and, all the medicines are being commoditized in the modern world, and so that has negatives along with it as well. So, we're there to kind of show the beauty and amazing things with these things, because like Rak has highlighted, I mean, the esoteric is what's on the inside. And I kind of think as the esoteric as being for like the Jedi, and, you know, the exoteric is what's on the outside. So we can only really show the exoteric on camera, but ultimately the show is kind of maybe a piece to document these things in a very kind of cinematic, visual way for people that are interested in seeing what some of these experiences look like for people exoterically on the outside. But then ultimately it's like the Matrix, right? Like where you don't have any idea what it's really like until you directly experience it for yourself.
Yeah, I think you did a good job though at showing people's exoteric or their esoteric experience. I mean, it definitely came across that these people that in your first episode at least had profound, potentially healing experiences for sure.
Oh yeah. I mean, absolutely. And that's the thing, is that we tried to show the seriousness of the medicine, and again, like how it's there's no messing around with this stuff. You know, it's not recreational and it's very serious stuff. But if you go into it with the right setting and the right mindset, and, you know, engage your kind of, like to use the term, like your will to want to either expand your consciousness or heal yourself from some sort of ailment that you've had. If you kind of have those parts, you can have the most kind of beautiful, life transforming experience of your life. And that's kind of that's basically what we had on the episode. We had one gentleman in the episode who, took probably a little bit more than he needed to. And again, it's not like you can overdose on this stuff unless you have some horrible heart condition or something, but he did take more than he needed to. So we had one person that had a very trying experience on the show because of that. Yeah. But, you know, it's like, that's the dynamic, is that's why it's also good to do it with somebody that's of, you know, high moral character and is an honorable person that's worked with the medicine and knows like the whole dynamics and the intricacies with it, so that you have that beautiful kind of life transforming experience. And that's something that, you know, the show is not only kind of a piece of filmmaking that I'm extremely proud of, it's also something that, you know, after we were done making the show, I tried the medicine as well. So it was absolutely a completely life transforming experience for me. And that's not documented in the show itself, but it's just something to kind of speak to the direct life experience I had. That's, you know, a beautiful thing, because you can only kind of really ultimately speak about your own direct experiences.
I was just going to ask you that too, if you did that.
Yeah, I did. And that's the beauty of shamanism, is it's like you don't need any middlemen between you and something greater. And I almost think of the metaphor of like, you've either got your computer that's just air gapped, it's not connected to anything, or else you've got your computer that's connected to the internet. So when you take one of these things and you do it in the proper respect and proper setting and the proper context, it's like you're suddenly connected to the astral internet, and you can have a beautiful, you know, kind of divine transcendent experience. So I did have the pleasure of doing the medicine at the end of the kind of filming of the final finale of the episode. And it was incredibly life transforming. I'll probably do a whole kind of, like you guys do on the show, a whole kind of side trip report as to like all the kind of information that I got, because I had an amazing kind of what's called a Kensho moment of this kind of gnosis of amazing kind of many downloads that happen in a short amount of time, because it's quite short. I mean, it only lasts depends on how much you take, but it only lasts for probably 5 or 10 minutes, at least for me it did. So it's relatively life transforming.
It's even shorter than
very short amount of time.
Is that a question?
Yeah, that's crazy. It seems like those powerful ones,
and, you know,
don't seem to last long.
Go ahead, man. Yeah, it's very short. It's very, very short. I mean, I think that if you look at DMT, it looks like we lost Rackman. We might want to add him back to the call. But if you look at DMT in terms of, obviously it's endogenous to our brain, but in terms of the kind of varying degrees of DMT, I mean, there's different kind of formations of phenylene and dimethyltryptamine that are secreted naturally within the brain. Yeah. And those are things that happen when we're in like sleep, for example, and like REM sleep. But if you look at NN-DMT, which is the DMT that Terence McKenna oftentimes talked about, you know, that's a very visual form of dimethyltryptamine. And then 5-MeO-DMT, which is what's in the toad, is a very different experience. And it's very different in terms of the amount that you take and the experience that you have. And then Octavio also has a separation between 5-MeO-DMT and the toad medicine, because the toad is the natural form of this.
Oh, yeah, right.
5-methoxy and dimethyltryptamine. So there's almost like a third differentiation there, where he advocates that he has a separation between 5-MeO and toad medicine. So that's a kind of dynamic where there's so much to kind of learn about this stuff and so much to kind of understand in the different modalities and different kind of balances of these earth medicines. So, do we want to add Rak back?
Yeah, I did once, and he's gone. He's gone again. So I'll try again here and see. So Niles,
is bulldoze his house.
Is that is that experience still pretty clear in your mind after a bit of time has gone by?
It is. And I did a kind of download of my conversation with some gals that I've had on my podcast who are really good friends that are related to my other documentary project.
Yeah.
So probably to that is at some point I will make that public. I will publicly share like my whole experience. So I'll send that to you guys when it's ready. And I know you get a lot of kick out of it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
You can only really talk about your own experiences. And if somebody kind of feels the call to these things or is interested in these things, it's good to obviously do the research and see what kind of pro and con experiences others have had. But when you get the kind of firsthand, around the campfire conversation of what somebody else experienced, it's nice because it builds that kind of camaraderie and that fellowship to know that people have had beautiful, life-changing experiences off these things that have either, like we highlighted before, there's kind of only really two reasons why you'd want to take this medicine. And it's not for recreational purposes. It's not for just tripping out for fun. It's for either A, healing, which is, coming into wholeness. Like, so we're not like George Gurdjieff says, where we're just machines we are born and machines we will die, where we just go to our 9-to-5 jobs every day and repeat until we die. It's like we realize there's more to life than that. And that's part of kind of the healing process, is understanding what it is to be a human being, but also the expansion of your consciousness, your consciousness being your kind of way that you see the world and the, way that you interact with the world. And Mark Passio has a definition of consciousness where it's your ability and awareness to recognize patterns and meanings, both externally in the world and internally within yourself. And sadly today, we have a lot of people that the consciousness is so low, it's almost, unbelievable how low it is. So we have a lot of people that kind of could use these direct experiences. It's all about your direct experience.
Yeah. Well, we keep losing Rak here, but I keep trying to get him back. Are you there now, Rak? Okay, he keeps dropping off. Niles, do you want to mention some of the other, or how people can watch these documentaries? They go to your website, which is obviously in the show notes. They can click on that. But can you talk a little bit about the logistics of your sites and how to get this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we had a little bit of technical problems here, but I think we got the gist of it. And obviously, Rak is so eloquent about speaking on this. I kind of just let him do his thing a bit. So it's nice that it worked out that way. But it's like, so basically the show is available at shamansoftheglobalvillage.com. That's kind of the home base that we have for it. That's the official site. And as something where the subject matter of the show is so kind of paradigm destroying, I almost want to say that it's a little ahead of its time, this show. So it's not like you're going to be seeing it blasted across, Amazon.com or Netflix anytime soon. So it's something that was created just independently by Rak and I as this, series. I mean, we made it for very little money. We made it for less money than, the typical film uses on their food budget in a single day. And as somebody that's worked in and out of Hollywood, I could personally tell you that, there's a lot of money spent on film sets every day. And for somebody that's an independent filmmaker that's just trying to always work on more kind of conscious projects, my background in Hollywood kind of really showed me what I could do and what not to do, especially in terms of money spent. Mm-hmm. So it was something that was made for very little money, and it's something that as a bottom-up product, it's basically like something where we're just doing it as a direct-to-audience thing. So you can always be watched there, and it's something that we are having as a paid download or a rental, because there's kind of a significant cost to make each episode. So it's something where it's nice to make it a sustainable venture where we can just have a little bit of a cost for people to rent the show or to purchase the show. But, I want people should really think of this as kind of like a community support thing, where think of it as kind of a donation to help kind of keep the process going, where we're just kind of, as documentary filmmakers, trying to show these experiences for people. And there's so many different kind of earth medicines that are also different, that we're trying to, from show to show, really use this as a nice piece of not only cinema that's beautifully shot and well documented and well, directed. Hopefully, that's kind of always my intention, and as the main person behind the camera. But then with kind of Rak's, knowledge base and ties to the community and obviously like eloquence talking about the material as the kind of guy in front of the camera, I think it's just a beautiful kind of combination of our kind of synergistic skill sets. So you can always see it there. And, you can find it at social media as well. But, it's nice to kind of go onto these platforms and share it as well, like your guys' show. And these kind of, there's so much great media online these days because the internet has just changed everything. Yeah. So for us, it's kind of like a product where it's like a book, where we've written our book and then we have to basically just kind of go around and kind of share it just to kind of get the word out. It's just something that's very much a bottom-up product.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
We'll definitely do our best to spread it as far as we can. So, I mean, Rettig, it's fair. That's sort of value for value. You watch a show, cost you guys some money, throw a couple bucks your way. And is there any sort of monthly subscription people can get on to kind of keep getting the new one sent to them?
No, I mean, there is. We might have it on some services potentially down the line. That'll be some subscription services that would be elsewhere, but you can always watch it at the official site. So that's kind of the kind of best way to go direct to source to do it as kind of a donation that really just kind of helps fund future episodes, because I mean, if we do this show, obviously it's something where we very much want to go around the world with it and not only just show people document the experiences authentically, but also go to the original countries where these sacraments kind of originated. Like, for example, on the second episode, we're probably looking to do it with a medicine called ibogaine, which has huge healing properties, where if somebody is hooked on some, junk narcotic like methamphetamine or heroin, if you have the ability and want and will to heal yourself, because ultimately you can only heal you. We are ultimately the medicine, and the earth medicine is only kind of like the catalyst to allow you to heal yourself. Iboga can be a huge, amazing thing for like curing, heroin addiction on one iboga use. So again, it depends on the individual, it depends on the experience, it depends on the container. But so that's, for example, something that we would shoot in Africa, in Gabon, Africa. So there'd be quite a, cost as an independent show to get out there and do it. So, it's, we're taking it one step at a time. I mean, it's just as an independently made series, it's something that we basically have to just kind of do episode per episode whenever we can. Right. There's no set.
What about some of the other stuff?
Like a book series again.
What about some of the other stuff you're working on there, Niles?
Yeah, well, I mean, this show is kind of Rak and I's dynamic, and is something that he kind of conceptualized, and I kind of helped him make, and we have the perfect skill sets to counter it. It's kind of one of the main primary projects. I also have a documentary film I'm working on that I think last time I chatted with you guys, I hinted on, which is something I'm doing with a philosopher and esotericist named Neil Kramer. Yeah. Which is called Transmutation. And actually, that's another project that's a documentary film that we're just finishing. So that's my next project.
Yeah, it looks cool.
Coincidentally, actually, thank you, man. I'd started it prior to this show, and because documentaries can take so long to make, it's actually going to be concluded. It's going to be done next year, early next year, so very soon. So that can be seen you can view kind of the info for that at transmutationfilm.com. So those are kind of my two products I sound like a capitalist. My two kind of pieces of creativity that I'm, making as my primary kind of things as an independent filmmaker these days. But, and I think that's the dynamic these days, is just making stuff that you kind of find a connection with people or a connection with an audience, and you almost go straight to the audience. And I don't want to say completely bypass the middleman these days, but create stuff that people are interested in. And the only way you're going to create content like the content that I'm doing, which is hopefully has high production values with really kind of leading edge, almost ahead of its time content, is to do that kind of, independently. So you see kind of the best stuff from the bottom up, as we very well know, with things like your guys' show or podcasts. It's about, grassroots.
I think that value for value or on-demand programming is the future anyway. Like, I mean, sure, Netflix and Amazon Prime and things like that might be good outlets, but I mean, the cable dinosaur is dying fast. People are unplugging like crazy, and it's just a matter of time until, people are going to pick and choose what little outlets. Instead of having $100 a month bill for cable, they're going to spend their $100 a month on some video content here and some audio content there. And I think you guys are out in front of it, man.
Yeah. Well, thank you, fellas. I mean, it's always nice to talk talk to you. I appreciate, what you guys are doing. I know that we've shared commonalities and people that have started podcasts as well about just the, community outreach and the nice dynamic of doing something that you've created yourself that's kind of a conscious thing that allows you to kind of spread your wings and meet new people and kind of connect with community. So that's something that my work I'm hoping to always do as well. And I think this show is a nice vehicle to do, even though it's kind of a new piece of, intellectual, it's kind of new content that, just have to kind of get out as the word spreads kind of from the community.
Right on. Yeah, I agree. Thanks, man. So, hey, I tried to get Rak on a couple times here, but it failed again. So you'll have to say bye to him for us and thank him for coming on and thank you for coming on as well.
Yeah, thank you for having us, man. I'm sure that, it was nice to get both of us on, even with our kind of slight technical difficulties. But we really appreciate it, man. And thanks for doing what you guys are doing as always. It's a pleasure anytime I talk to both of you.
All right. Thanks a lot, Niles.
Next time we'll have to do in studio.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know you guys have done a lot of work on your studio, so it'd be great to see it one day.
All right. Okay, thanks a lot, Niles. Okay.
Cheers, fellas. Bye.
Well, despite some questionable audio, that was okay. That was a good one. That was a great chat.
Yeah, it was a good
movie.
movie.
Me nuts, those little audio hiccups.
Yeah.
Just like picking away at it's like if you just sat here and poked me in the head the whole time.
Yeah.
It is election night.
I can't do anything.
Oh, that could have something to do with it. Right?
Just the amount of people using the internet. That's people refreshing.
Oh, maybe.
Refresh.
Maybe, just millions of people refreshing. Actually, you're probably right.
Oh, it's like huger.
Yeah.
Way bigger than Super Bowl.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And he was the American guy, right? Because our feed was fine and Australia was fine.
That's right. Huh.
Yeah.
Crazy. Oh, we live on the best internet street in Alberta.
Do you?
I don't know.
Yeah, well, probably in Canada.
Just guessing. I don't know.
It doesn't get much better than that, I don't think.
It's that cable connection, and I'm like, there's only like 4 people on it.
So yeah, that was good. It was a really good episode. Very, very real.
Big thanks to Niles and Rak for coming on the show. Any comments before we wrap it up, Michael, on your fly on the wall experience?
No, it's just great being here, looking around the studio. You guys have a lot of cool stuff to check out, and listening to Niles, they're both just a wealth of information, and it's good to see life from that perspective.
Exactly. It gives us hope, sort of, right? I mean, there's a whole awakening going on in the background that if you're not really aware of it, you won't see it. So I got a question for you, Mike. Darren and I were traveling through the States, and he got to go to his little dispensary, and I was like, they're going to have this for mushrooms soon.
I said no.
They'll have
not
like
close. No,
a
there's
little
no
like
chance.
psilocybin dispensary. Different strains of mushrooms and all that. How long do you think it'll take for that?
I don't know. It's hard to say because, the marijuana was taken out for a reason. The marijuana was taken out for a reason, so bringing it back could only also be for a reason. Now, I don't know.
I don't see mushrooms in our lifetime.
Yeah,
really?
I don't either.
I didn't see pot in our lifetime. I mean, we should just be happy with that. I mean, fucking seriously, it's only full legal in like 3 or 4 states. I mean, Florida got the medical vote tonight. So shout out to Adam Loyal. He's all excited about that.
It would be nice to see if it wasn't criminal.
Yeah.
At least, decriminalization, I think, would be a victory.
Yeah.
Would be a victory in our lifetime.
Yeah.
So I can get a fine. I could pay the fine. Everybody wins except me. I'm on 150.
So would you smoke your DMT then? Or what if I look that up right now and it's legal?
Alleged DMT. It's not legal.
It's not? You've already looked into that?
Not. I'm not an idiot. It's a Schedule 1 narcotic, I'm pretty sure.
In Canada?
Yeah.
Huh.
I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it is. So I stick to my medicine. It's legal. I have a card in my wallet. It says, fuck off.
Look, it just pops up right away. Right away. Where do you get DMT?
Oh, man, people constantly comment on the YouTube episodes. Any YouTube episode we does that have DMT in the description, people are in the comments trying to sell you DMT.
No way.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Send us your cash. I guarantee it's mostly scams.
You think so?
Oh, yeah. People get in that mode and they're like, oh, being all probably sending bitcoins, or you're on the dark web, and then all of a sudden you're fucking $50 less lighter.
Canada, DMT is Schedule 3 in Canada.
That's not bad. It's like a slap on the wrist.
There you go.
There you go. I can't even get a joint into you.
No.
Anyway, big thanks to Niles and Rak for coming on the show. Check out grimerica.ca/support and help us upgrade the internet so we don't get those annoying cutouts. Seriously, though, help us stay ad sponsor affiliate bullshit free. Sign up for a monthly subscription or do a one-time donation. Spam grab. What else?
Review us on iTunes.
Review the show.
Please.
Just go into the show notes and do all the stuff that we ask you to do there.
Yeah,
Seriously.
there's a whole list. There's a do list.
That's right. If you did everything on the list, it would take you like 15 minutes. You know how long we spend every week putting this show together for you? You can spend the 15 minutes. I think that's it, eh?
Yeah, that's it, man.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.
Spend